Dear participants, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you today here in a side event during the 60th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council. The theme of our panel is global reprisals against human rights defenders, restrictive laws, intimidation, and criminalization of advocacy. So we gather at a time when the right to defend rights is being subjected to deliberate, organized, and increasingly transnational forms of repression. The Secretary General's latest report on the reprisals documents the scale and sophistication of these practices. Individuals and organizations that engage with the United Nations and other multilateral mechanisms are facing surveillance, arbitrary detention, criminal prosecution, and various forms of intimidation. Today, we are going to address this critical issue, particularly in the context of Palestine, which is the most pressing issues of our time. So I'm not going to steal too much time from our panelists. We have 6 speakers. We have the president of İKADDER, Neyir Akbulut. We have İKADDER, president of WOLAS, the Worldwide Lobbyists Association. They are going to provide their opening remarks, and then we will move to other panelists. So for the opening remarks, I will give you the floor to Neyir, the president of İKADDER.
Thank you. Welcome again. Today, I address you in my capacity as the chair of the board, Istanbul Women and Women's Organizations Association. İKADDER is a civil society organization accredited to the United Nations Economic and Social Council since 2018. And our organization is a non-governmental organization that works on principle of voluntarism with the belief that women contribute indispensable value to every aspect of life. For us, voluntarism is not only an understanding, but also a way of life, one of the most vital resources of our planet. As a women's organization, we would like to particularly emphasize that women are not only disproportionately affected by conflicts and humanitarian crises, but are also transformative actors in building peace, justice, and sustainable development. International law clearly recognizes the necessity of women's equal participation in decision-making mechanisms, processes concerning peace and security. The empowerment of women is therefore not a privilege, but a binding obligation established by international norms, ranging from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. In this context, we are deeply saddened by the heavy losses suffered by humanitarian aid workers and volunteers, members of the global humanitarian family, during the processes of especially genocide in Gaza. Women in particular face severe risks that disproportionately affect their lives, such as displacement, loss of family members, and the collapse of essential services like healthcare and education. Yet, despite all these challenges, women continue to stand at the forefront of humanitarian efforts, defending human dignity, justice, and accountability. Today, we are organizing this side event to shed light on the challenges faced by the humanitarian aid volunteers working on against human rights violations in different parts of the world, and to present our proposed solutions. With the hope that this session will be fruitful, and once again, thank you. Coming here.
Thank you for this opening speech. Now I'll give the floor to İKADDER, the president of WOLAS.
Distinguished participants, dear colleagues, and honorable guests. It's a great honor to welcome you all to this important side event. On behalf of the Worldwide Lawyers Association, I would like to thank you for joining us and to express our gratitude to İKADDER for their valuable partnership. We meet at a critical moment. Across the world, we are witnessing an alarming rise in reprisals against human rights defenders. Restrictive laws are being adopted with the purpose of shrinking civic space. Intimidation and harassment are becoming systematic tools to silence critical voices. Advocacy is being criminalized. WOLAS was founded on the belief that lawyers and legal practitioners must not remain passive in the face of such injustice. WOLAS is an international organization that brings together lawyers, academics, and human rights defenders from different countries and backgrounds. Through legal action, research, advocacy, and education, we aim to promote justice, accountability, and the rule of law. This event is therefore more than just an academic discussion or a policy exchange. It's a call to action, a call to protect the space for human rights and to reaffirm the principle that no one should be punished for seeking justice, and a call to ensure that human rights defenders are able to continue their work without fear. We know the challenges are great, but we also know that change has always been driven by those who refused to remain silent. Each one of us here has a role to play. By working together, we can create space of safety, amplify the voices of the vulnerable, and building a stronger global movement for justice. On behalf of WOLAS, I thank you once again being here today. May our discussions inspire not only greater understanding, but also concerted action. Let us leave this room with renewed determination to protect human rights defenders everywhere and to continue the struggle for justice, dignity, and freedom. Thank you.
Thank you for this opening speech. Now we will skip to our panelists. We will start with Melania Schweizer. Her topic is going to be defending human rights when states drop their obligations during genocide. Global Sumud Filosu, activists taking on state responsibility. So to open the discussion, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. So I imagine you might have followed the recent events last night when the global flotilla, Sumud Flotilla activists have been intercepted by the Israeli forces. So the question is, and there are many other vessels and ships, small and large, trying to break the siege in Gaza. So how can we protect those who are forcibly taken by the Israeli forces, and how can we protect those who have not yet reached that point of interception by the Israeli forces? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this event, for inviting me to this event and giving me also the space to talk about the global Sumud flotilla that, and the other flotillas that are on their way to Gaza and human rights defenders in the context of the genocide in Palestine. At this exact time, ladies and gentlemen, was the estimated time of arrival for the around 50 vessels from more than 46 countries of around 500 international participants in Gaza, the largest historical coordinated nonviolent internationalist civilian mission, including doctors, lawyers, parliamentarians, unionists, artists, and many civil society actors, with the sole aim to deliver humanitarian aid, baby formula, food, medicine, and essentials to the besieged Gaza Strip and to break the illegal and inhumane blockade imposed on Gaza by Israel for nearly 2 decades, to affirm the principles of international law and dignity. I speak, of course, of the global Sumud Flotilla and the growing wave of global reprisal against those who dare to stand for justice, humanitarian access, freedom, and international law. Last night, the global Sumud Flotilla was subjected to yet another major attack for the 4th time since its initial launch in September. The mandate of the global Sumud Flotilla is purely humanitarian, to open a maritime corridor to alleviate the catastrophic suffering in Gaza, especially among civilians, women and children, to restore dignity for those under occupation, and to bear witness. Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. This is not only the conclusion of the vast majority of NGOs and scholars, but also the UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territories, who just made this conclusion a couple of days ago. Israelis are killing 100 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip on average on a daily basis, a class of school children amongst them. Despite the harrowing images and reports of this horrific violence committed in impunity, world leaders by a vast majority remain silent and choose not to act. The numbers of murdered people vary between 68,000 and 680,000 people. Yesterday, in a night of Israeli terror, the flotilla was violently intercepted in international waters around 90 nautical miles away from the shores of Gaza. The nearly 500 passengers were forcibly abducted and transported to Israel against their will in a manner of taking hostage of them. Many were held incommunicado, some subjected to degrading treatment, water cannons, and their vessels seized and their humanitarian mission violently crushed. This act is not only a violation of international law, it is an affront to the very principles of the Human Rights Council that is bound to defend. While the flotilla is peaceful and in complete alignment with international law, its members have been subjected to a series of threats, attacks, and reprisals and psychological warfare, such as drone attacks, absurd accusations of terrorism and criminalization in order to manufacture consent for Israeli violence, the blockade and obstruction of aid, the risk to life, safety, arbitrary detention, kidnapping, and other states, and another state against their will, the lack of communication, flights of drones overhead, sabotage to the boats, all impose not just physical risk, but also intimidation, and are intended to silence who stand in solidarity with people under siege. Let's be clear, international law and humanitarian norms provide a robust protection for this. The whole global Sumud Flotilla was 100% legal and is the freedom right of everyone embarking on these missions. Civilians engaged in peaceful humanitarian action, including medical and relief work, and the delivery of humanitarian assistance, especially to civilians in need, is protected under international conventions and laws such as the San Remo Handbook and many more. The Israeli siege and blockade on the Gaza Strip is illegal. This was already confirmed by many organizations, including the International Court of Justice, who just rendered in its advisory opinion from July 2024 that the occupation is illegal. And also, of course, genocide is illegal. There are prohibitions on collective punishments that are applying in this case of a total humanitarian blockade of the Gaza Strip. The blockade of Gaza, if maintained in a way that deprives civilians of essential humanitarian supplies, amounts to collective punishment and a grave breach of the Fourth Geneva Convention. Condemning genocide and mass starvation should be normal, and it should not constitute to make you a human rights defender by itself. Furthermore, the reprisals against human rights defenders are expressly prohibited under international human rights law. Defenders must be able to carry out their work free from intimidation, arbitrary detention, or violence. States have the obligations either to respect it or to ensure that others refrain from such actions. Civil society initiatives like the Sumud Flotilla are born of desperation and moral compulsion when states and institutions fail to act. The lack of action is complicit in suffering. Member states must not only speak, but act. The violations also do not stop there. Around the world, those who defend Palestinian rights or who stand in solidarity with the flotilla are facing mounting reprisals. In many countries, defenders have been harassed, censored, surveilled, and in some cases criminalized. Peaceful protests have been banned or violently dispersed. Humanitarian and solidarity organizations have been defunded, stigmatized, or threatened with legal dissolution. Instead of upholding their legal responsibility under international law, many predominantly Western states choose to violate freedom rights. About 1 year ago, I was also here at the UN, representing the state of Germany in my function as a former civil servant and senior policy advisor. After publicly criticizing Israel for its genocide in Palestine and Germany for its role in aiding and abetting in December 2024, I was fired myself by the German Federal Ministry. This now in Germany is not the exception, but rather the norm. Democratic states such as Germany have become deeply complicit in the violence, dehumanization and silencing, restricting demonstrations, criminalizing expressions of solidarity, and punishing human rights defenders for exercising fundamental freedoms of assembly, expression, and conscience. Such repressions aligns them with violations rather than with international human rights obligations and makes them accessories in silencing civil society. Today, I am ashamed of my German government. Never again was a lie. It is happening again, and Germany is at the forefront of the atrocities again, delivering weapons, political and economic support as much as it can. How blind of racism must we be to not see the deliberate annihilation of the Palestinian people? Last night's attack of the global Sumud flotilla is not only an attack on solidarity with Gaza, it's an attack on the universal right to defend human rights everywhere. And it becomes a question of legitimacy for every government who remains inactive and silent. What can we do to ensure the human rights of the human rights defenders? States whose nationals are aboard the flotilla and flag states of the vessels must take strong actions to ensure protection. As a matter of fact, there are plenty of European Union flag states under the ships. Those are, for example, the Netherlands, Germany, Spain, Italy. And when their ships are traveling in international seas, their domestic laws apply. So it is up for the member states of the European Union, who are these flag states, to go after the Israeli occupation forces and demand the release of the hostages that they have been taking of their own state's civilians, and to ask and request justice for the illegal seizure of those ships and for stealing those ships in international waters. All states should publicly and unequivocally condemn any attempt to criminalize, detain, intimidate, or interfere with the flotilla and other human rights defenders. Threats to label them as terrorists without due process or credible evidence must be strongly rejected. Every state must remind Israel and any other relevant actor of its obligations under the Geneva Convention, the UNLOC UN Charter, and human rights treaties. This includes allowing unimpeded access for essential relief and cease using starvation or blockade as instruments of war. There must be independent and transparent investigations into all of these violent incidents that we have seen over the last couple of weeks and years, especially in Palestine. The Council should adopt stronger protections for defenders all around the world. This means better safeguards and prompt responses to threats. Civil society initiatives like the GSF are born out of desperation and moral compulsion when states and institutions fail to act. The lack of action is complicit in suffering. We are tested not only by what we allow to happen, but by what we fail to prevent. The global Sumud flotilla is more than a flotilla. It's a symbol of conscience, a challenge to the status quo, and a call to honor the legal and moral commitments of the United Nations and its member states. To protect human dignity is to protect the right to life, the right to relief, the right to defend. To allow those who act out of concern to continue without fear is to reinforce the foundations of justice. International law is clear. Israel must end its horrific genocide against the Palestinians and leave the illegally occupied Palestinian territories immediately. For as long as Israel refuses to respect international law, there will be flotillas, there will be protests, and there will be armed resistance. The Palestinian people and the international civil society have a right to resist genocide, apartheid, and the illegal occupation by a settler state. We are not the criminals, they are. Thank you very much.
Thank you for addressing this very relevant issue, which was very critical and in a very timely moment. So we will now skip to Hüseyin Dişli, who is a board member of Worldwide Lawyers Association. His topic will be defending the defenders facing reprisals for engaging the ICC. So again, I'd like to open the discussion with a question, and then you can build on this. So recently, we've seen that some governments, particularly the United States, started imposing some sanctions for lawyers, members of the civil society, and human rights activists for their involvement with the ICC. So how would you address this issue?
Dear guests, thank you for coming here, joining us here today. As Hassan said, Dr. Hassan said, I'm Hüseyin Dişli, legal academic and vice president of WOLAS. The question is actually, this question arose earlier this year when US subjected some, first of all, the ICC stuff, then some associations, Palestinian associations, to the sanctions. So this came under actually the very executive order 14203 was earlier this year when the ICC staff was sanctioned. And this was followed by further sanctions of the other ICC staff, such as the vice prosecutor, etc. Similarly, under this framework, this is an executive order by presidency. Under the same order, Al-Haq, Palestinian Center for Human Rights, Al-Mizan, the three leading Palestinian human rights organizations, has been sanctioned. Before then, we have witnessed that UN Special Rapporteur for Palestine, Francesca Albanese, was sanctioned. And as I said, judges and prosecutors. Of course, I mean, we should ask the offense in terms of the Palestinian organizations. What's the offense? Offense is simply engaging the ICC to seek accountability for Israeli officials accused of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The substance of these sanctions are like some financial, some diplomatic, starting from freezing the assets, revoking visas, criminalizing legal advocacy, and publicly stigmatizing defenders of international law. So, in my view, and I guess global legal community also agrees, that the vantage point here is that this is a counterinsurgency, a legal retaliation dressed in the language of sovereignty and power. This is using law as a lawfare, pushing those who use it against its architects. I think it is really important to start to link this phenomena to the very erasure of Palestinian lawyers in Gaza. Palestinian lawyers this is from Palestine Bar Association. The latest report was the legal infrastructure was suggesting that legal infrastructure has been systematically raised in Gaza. Palestinian Bar Association headquarters has been bombed and flattened. 215 lawyers killed, over 200 injured, over 900 of law offices destroyed, courts completely suspended, some are destroyed. Over 3,400 lawyers displaced, thousands are living in tents, their archive incinerated, their families grieving. The legal profession is not simply a technical apparatus. It's a collective institution designed to defend the rights of people, to bear witness, to seek redress, and to uphold the right to self-determination, especially in the case of Palestinian lawyers. Because lawyers are not there to protect the rights of only individuals, but also the nation that they belong to. And Palestine as a land, and Palestinian people, given that they have right to self-determination, they need to fulfill and achieve this right. This is amounting to full sovereignty over their land, their aerial space, and their maritime zones. So with this opportunity, I convey my greatest salutes to the participants of Global Sumud Flotilla who are being intercepted while we are speaking. Also to participants of Freedom Flotilla coalition who are en route to Gaza while we are speaking with 11 ships. So given that right to self-determination has to be achieved, lawyers' role is key. And by erasing lawyers, killing, displacing, and injuring them, the very attack is not only individual lawyers, but also the very people of Palestine. This is hindering their liberation. This is hindering their hope to be thrilled. Well, this is not an anomaly from a critical legal practice viewpoint, because law is, from this viewpoint, critical legal scholarship and critical legal practice, law is both a tool of domination and terrain of struggle. Law is not a stable and concrete set of norms. It is a battleground shaped by history, by power, by colonial violence, but also by those who fight back. So this is not anomaly, of course, because colonial powers always fear legal counter-memory. This was what the Palestinian organizations and the lawyers there were doing. The lawyer who documents war crimes is dangerous because she or he threatens to turn violence into evidence, oppression into accountability, and occupation into liability in order to achieve societal catharsis. As well as we express full solidarity with Palestinian Bar Association and all lawyers working under the siege. We call on national bar associations everywhere to mobilize immediately at the interbar and international level to defend our colleagues and to resist all efforts to silence or annihilate legal accountability efforts, be it military, be it financial, or be it lawfare as oppression mechanism. So we talked about the very recent sanctions on the Palestinian organizations. Can I ask how much time I have? 3 minutes, please. Okay. So the message here is very clear. If you investigate Israeli war crimes, you will be sanctioned. If you support and engage in ICC, you will be criminalized. If you speak for victims, you may be the next. Critical legal scholarship urges us to remember, international law wasn't broken by empire, it was built for it. We must reject the nostalgia, and yet we must also refuse resignation. We don't believe in law, we use it critically, reflexively, and collectively, and live in it. So let us also be clear, the threats are not only institutional, they are personal and lived. Palestinian advocates and plaintiffs face serious danger, not just from Israeli repression, but often from the host countries where they reside or seek asylum. Filing an ICC complaint or testifying before UN body can lead to surveillance, border harassment, loss of livelihood, or worse, collective punishment of their families. This is why the role of all lawyers in the world is critical. When International Legal Counsel appear alongside Palestinian claimants at immigration hearings, security interrogations, or court filings, they create a protective layer. They can intervene, amplify, and sometimes simply keep people alive. This is not abstract solidarity, it's a legal accompaniment in the face of that and silencing. To conclude, I will conclude with our calls on behalf of Wallace. But before that, I would like to quote something from joint statement of Al-Haq, Al-Mizan, and PCHR. By protecting, I quote, Israel from accountability, they are dismantling the international legal order and undermining justice for victims of grave crimes everywhere. And this goes beyond Palestine, of course. Palestine represents, and it is the embodiment of, it's a front line of the struggle between the hegemony and liberation. So our collective duty, on behalf of all us, I issue these urgent calls. National bar associations must urgently mobilize to defend Palestinian lawyers and bar institutions. UN member states must condemn all the sanctions on the legal community, such as Executive Order 14203, and resist US attempts to sanction justice. In February 2025, 79 states parties led by Slovenia, Luxembourg, Mexico, and Sierra Leone and Vanuatu, they already issued a joint statement reaffirming their unwavering support for the independence, impartiality, and integrity of the ICC. So all the sanctions, when we speak about all the sanctions, what's at stake is the global fight against immunity. International legal institutions must protect ICC cooperation and those who pursue it. All of us must speak and act to stop the genocide in Gaza and to reclaim the legal system from the jaws of impunity. And finally, I would like to conclude with this note that according to Article 70 of the Rome Statute, which is titled Offenses Against the Administration of Justice, I quote, the court shall have jurisdiction over the following offenses against its administration of justice when committed intentionally. D, impeding, intimidating, or corruptly influencing an official of the court for the purpose of forcing or persuading the official not to perform or to perform improperly his or her duties. And retaliating against an official of the court on the account of duties performed by that or another official. According to Article 7(1)(e), ICC from now on has a jurisdiction over United States as well. Thank you for listening to me. I also convey my deepest salute to heroic people of Gaza, the resilient, the wounded, the steadfast, the martyred, and to all members of the international community who stand with them.
Thank you for this strong speech and to expose how laws have been manipulated by powerful states to suppress and oppress civil spaces and how the laws are being used against the lawyers themselves. So we are now going to skip to our another panelist, Henriette Wilberg. She will be speaking on the protection of human rights defenders and humanitarian workers, including UNRWA personnel in the occupied Palestinian territories. Can we have the mic, please? So again, the question would be, how can we protect human rights defenders and humanitarian workers in the occupied Palestinian territories against oppression?
Thank you very much for the question and for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. I'd like to start by acknowledging the critical and essential work that Palestinian human rights defenders have been playing in documenting and monitoring violations in the OPT. And this is going on for decades. Their work is essential, particularly in a context where their rights are being systematically denied and where international actors either lack access or fall short in their response and are constrained by deep-seated biases. For decades, individuals and organizations have worked to document apartheid, settler colonialism, and Israel's genocide in Gaza. Their work seeks to uphold the rights of Palestinians, both individually, their rights to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, but also the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and defending their right to return. We haven't mentioned it yet, but the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders articulates the rights that already exist in human rights law, but recognizes the special status of human rights defenders and the interest that the international community has in protecting and promoting this status. And the key thing, I think, to note from this is that attacks upon human rights defenders are not just attacks on individual rights, but they are attacks on civil society and, in this case, upon the Palestinian solidarity movement. So, as I said, for decades, individuals and organizations working on human rights in relation to the occupied Palestinian territory have faced attacks, defamation, and reprisals. We are now witnessing an escalation in repressive measures that target Palestinian civil society, and this includes activists, lawyers, journalists. The measures are legislative, they're judicial, and they are administrative. This is particularly the case with an escalation in Gaza, where we see targeted attacks on journalists that constitute a deliberate strategy to silence reporting and to limit the documentation of Israel's genocide. Palestinians who are exercising their basic rights, their right to freedom of speech, assembly, and association, are being subjected to widespread arrests and detention. This is often administrative detention, which is arbitrary. Travel bans, the revocation of residency rights, smear campaigns, the designation of terrorism, and campaigns of legal harassment, as been mentioned. Since October the 7th, we've seen a sweeping crackdown, a rising rate of repression, a rising rate of detention and incarceration. These measures aim to silence dissent. They aim to intimidate. They aim to delegitimize the work of human rights defenders, and they aim to dismantle the structures of Palestinian solidarity. In this way, their repression is also a central part of Israel's system of apartheid. It serves to fragment, isolate, and oppress Palestinians, and to prevent them from exercising their individual and their collective rights, including the right to self-determination and the right to return. I'd like to focus a little bit more closely on the systematic persecution of Palestinian civil society organizations. And these are organizations that monitor and document violations as part of Israel's apartheid settler colonial regime across the Palestinian occupied territory and document Israel's genocide in Gaza. And they particularly are calling for accountability. Their work has been globally recognized, and they've been working with the UN mechanisms, with the ICC, and with other global organizations. These organizations have long been attacked for their work. Their offices are raided. Their staff have been placed under surveillance using the Pegasus spyware. They have been designated as terrorist groups. They have been smeared in campaigns which seek to delegitimize their work entirely. This includes threats to their staff. It results in a danger and threat to the victims with whom they work and the evidence that they collect. And it also serves to damage the reputation of these organizations in the international arenas. Israel weaponizes counterterrorism law. Now, Israel's counterterrorism law is in and of itself problematic in the way that allows for broad enforcement rules with very vague definitions that open the possibility for widespread discrimination and the violation of fundamental rights. Since November 2023, new amendments to Israel's counterterrorism law have led to a disproportionate increase in the arrest of journalists, of activists and human rights defenders. Israel has failed to provide any evidence that support these claims. These are not legitimate threats, these are legal tools that are not just about surveillance and detention. They are designed specifically to cut off funding. They are part of a deliberate attempt to defund Palestinian civil society, to shrink the space for assistance to the Palestinian people. And they serve, therefore, to challenge the existence of these civil society organizations, but also the donor community upon whom they rely. Secondly, Palestinian organizations, and we've seen this with the ICC as well, are targeted particularly due to their work with the UN, their work with human rights mechanisms and international justice mechanisms, their work on accountability, so their work that seeks to document and to fight against Israel's impunity. And we can see this reflected in the US sanctions against Palestinian civil society organizations, which explicitly recognizes their work with the ICC. So these measures serve to strike at the foundation of international law and serve to uphold Israel's impunity. This is where Israel sees threatened. It's where its reputation on the international level is being challenged. And that's where we see it striking back with even more violent repression. Meanwhile, domestically, Israel is pushing forward legislation which serves to choke civil society, both within its both international NGOs and Palestinian civil society organizations. There are new registration rules which mean that international NGOs can be deregistered based on very vague politicized accusations like delegitimizing Israel. This prevents these organizations from doing their work, and it violates the humanitarian principles of neutrality. There's a proposed bill which criminalizes cooperation with the ICC, and another which heavily taxes NGOs who rely on foreign funding and blocks them from petitioning Israeli courts. These measures place large financial burdens on NGOs. They serve to shrink them and to dry them out. Taken together, they're designed to isolate Palestinian civil society, to silence dissent, and to silence the critique of Israel's apartheid regime and settler colonialism. And in this way, they insulate Israel from scrutiny and accountability.
Humanitarian workers in the context of human rights defenders.
Absolutely, and I think it's also worth noting here that humanitarian workers, including UNRWA personnel, critical humanitarian assistance. Thank you. With respect to UNRWA staff, Israel has a positive obligation under international law to protect personnel, facilities, operations. And instead of upholding this obligation, Israel has launched a coordinated attack against the agency. And that's through legal measures, through physical attacks on staff, disinformation campaigns, and the designation of UNRWA as a terrorist organization. This coordinated attack on humanitarian workers and on UNRWA not only violates Israel's obligation as a UN member and an occupying power, But I think it should also be clearly understood as part of Israel's broader genocidal conduct. It's aimed at depriving Palestinians in Gaza of the conditions of life essential to their survival. It's part of a systematic erasure of the healthcare system, the reproductive healthcare system, the legal system, as was mentioned. UNRWA also plays a crucial role in enabling the Palestinian people to realize their right to self-determination. And its unique mandate is tied to the question of Palestine, including the right to return for Palestinian refugees. And so the targeting of Palestinian civil society and humanitarian workers should be understood as part of a much wider pattern of crackdown on the humanitarian and the civic space. And especially with respect to UNRWA, these attacks seek to, or are designed to entrench Israeli domination, to consolidate the denial of the Palestinian people's right to self-determination.
Can we wrap up, please?
So maybe just a final statement is that these attacks are not incidental. They're part of a systematic persecution which is designed to consolidate the occupation, the apartheid, and the denial of Palestinian right to self-determination. Thank you.
Thank you so much for addressing the situation of Palestinian civil society and human rights groups in the occupied Palestinian territories. So we now move to our last speakers. Neyir Akbulut, the president of İKADDER. She will be talking about accountability and sanctions against perpetrators of genocide under international law. So, after all these discussions, how can we take some action to stop the ongoing genocide in Gaza?
Yes, I'm going to talk about all these things in my speech. Thank you so much. Since 7th October 2024, Thank you. Since 7th October 2024, the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and the systematic violations of international law committed by the State of Israel have been unfolding before our very eyes, including before the United Nations itself. This constitutes not only a grave affront to human rights and international humanitarian law, but also a fundamental challenge to the very credibility and integrity of the United Nations system. The international community cannot remain silent while civilian populations are deliberately targeted, humanitarian access is blocked, and the basic rights of millions are denied. These actions are not mere collateral damage of armed conflict. They constitute potential genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes as codified under the 1948 Genocide Convention and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Under the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, genocide is defined as acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, and religious group. The deliberate targeting of civilians, the imposition of life-threatening conditions, and systematic forced displacement in Gaza meet this definition. The International Court of Justice, in its landmark judgment in Bosnia and Serbia in 2007, reaffirmed that states are under a duty not only to refrain from committing a genocide, but also to prevent it. Israel's ongoing actions, coupled with the passivity of third states, constitutes a breach of this prevention obligation, rendering inaction itself legally significant. The conduct of hostilities also violates core principles of international humanitarian law, including distinction, proportionality, and civilian protection, enshrined in the 1949 Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols. Attacks on schools, hospitals, United Nations facilities, and shelters are indicative of systematic and deliberate breaches, undermining the entire framework designed to safeguard civilian populations during armed conflicts. The ICC provides a viable avenue for accountability. Given Palestine's state party status and ongoing submissions to the ICC, there exists a legal basis for prosecuting Israeli leaders, high-ranking officials, including the Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, Chief of General Staff, and other senior figures who continue to order operations resulting in mass civilian casualties, must be held criminally responsible. Repeated United Nations General Assembly resolutions calling for ceasefires adopted with overwhelming majorities further underscore the clear intent and awareness of these leaders in committing acts that fall within ICC jurisdiction. The persistence of attacks despite international mandates demonstrates a deliberate intent to commit crimes of an international character. Beyond individual accountability, the UN Charter provides mechanisms to address persistent violations by member states. In Article 5, allows the Security Council, upon recommending an action to suspend a member state from exercising its right and privileges in the General Assembly if it's subject to preventive or enforcement measures. And in Article 6, permits the Security Council to recommend the expulsion of a member state that persistently violates the principles of the Charter. The suspension of South Africa during the apartheid era demonstrates that these mechanisms are not merely theoretical, they can be effectively implemented to uphold the integrity of the United Nations system. Suspension or expulsion of Israel would send a powerful message that systematic violations of human rights and international law are intolerable. And Israel's entrenched policies of apartheid and systematic human rights violations also justify suspension or expulsion from other international organizations which it's a member. Membership rights in bodies such as World Trade Organization could be suspended on the grounds of the state-sanctioned violations of human rights and discriminatory practices. Historical precedent exists in the International Atomic Energy Agency, where a 1982 resolution sought to suspend Israel's membership rights following threats to neighboring states. Though ultimately blocked by political interventions, the effort demonstrates that suspension mechanisms are both available and legally justifiable under international organizational law. When the Security Council is unable or unwilling to act due to vetoes or political deadlock, the 1950 Uniting for Peace resolution provides the General Assembly with authority to recommend collective measures to maintain or restore the international peace and security. This mechanism can be utilized to advocate for binding or non-binding actions, including the suspension of Israel's rights in UN bodies, and to mobilize the international community for a coherent and principled response. Under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention, all states have duty to prevent genocide and not aid or abet its commissions. Third-party states providing military, economic, or diplomatic support to Israel may bear secondary responsibility for facilitating violations, invoking doctrines of aiding and abetting under international criminal law. The enforcement of these obligations is essential for the credibility of the multilateral legal system. Distinguished colleagues, the severity of Israel's actions demands more than a rhetorical condemnation. The international legal framework provides multiple avenues to uphold justice, prevent further violations, and reaffirm the supremacy of human rights. Suspension of or expulsion of Israel from the United Nations under Article 5 and 6 of UN Charter, prosecution of senior Israeli officials before the ICC, suspension from other international organizations such as WTO, coordinated action through the UN General Assembly under the Uniting for Peace resolution. These measures are essential not only for accountability, but also preserving the authority of international law and deterring future violations. Silence or inaction would amount to complicity, undermining the very principles upon which the United Nations and international law are founded. Today, among the rubble of destroyed homes in Gaza lie not only children's toys, but also unfinished compositions, unwritten poems, and unpainted canvases and leaves that were never fully lived. This represents a loss for all humanity. As consciousness becomes desensitized, our world is increasingly engulfed in darkness. Time sealed with the blood of Palestinian people reminds us a fundamental truth: the strongest form of resistance against oppression is collectively to be the voice of the oppressed. Today, it's our duty to amplify that voice and carry it across the world. History will record who stood for justice and who stood for impunity. The international community must act decisively. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your powerful speech and to be finishing on time. So we still have 4 minutes. If there are any contributions or questions, I can give the floor to participants. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for this insightful event, and thank you for touching this very delicate humanitarian situation right now happening in Gaza. I would like to say brief words also about Palestinian people and especially the situation of Palestinian women. Esteemed participants, dear colleagues, we reiterate our strong support and solidarity with Palestinian people. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is beyond catastrophic, with UN agencies officially confirming a famine, a grim first for the Middle East. This is a man-made crisis fueled by the weaponization of hunger. Turkey is gravely alarmed by the dire conditions faced by Palestinian women in the occupied Palestinian territory, particularly in Gaza. Palestinian women are enduring disproportionate suffering, loss of children and spouses, forced displacement, hunger, and denial of essential health services. Such acts represent grave breaches of international law and human rights. Turkey denounces these policies and practices. We call upon the international community to ensure accountability and guarantee that Palestinian women who stand at the heart of community resilience receive protection, justice, and the full enjoyment of their fundamental rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this statement. I thank you for all the panelists for their valuable speeches. I thank you for the participants for listening. I also thank United Nations for providing us this space to raise this important issue here in Geneva. With these closing sentences, this session ends. Thank you so much for listening.